Alright Reddit, buckle up, because you are not going to believe what happened to me today. I'm Josh, and for context, I'm a 34-year-old black man. I work for the FBI, yeah, that FBI. And no, before you ask, I'm not going to reveal what I do specifically. Let's just say I put bad guys away. Now, my car, bless its unreliable soul, decided this morning was the perfect time to start making a noise that sounded like a dying walrus. So, I had to drop it off at the mechanic near my office. Usually, I'd have asked a colleague for a ride, but everyone seemed swamped. Figured it was a good day to embrace public transportation. I haven't taken the city bus in years. I live in a reasonably good neighborhood, so my routes, thankfully, aren't too bad and usually relatively safe and uneventful. Famous last words, right? I grabbed a coffee and a book, a Clancy novel actually, a little light reading before I get home and tackle a mountain of paperwork from my current case. I paid the fare, found a window seat towards the back, and settled in, ready to zone out and pretend I was Jack Ryan foiling international conspiracies instead of just trying to make it home in time to catch the game. The bus was moderately full, mostly working folks heading home, a few students with overloaded backpacks, the typical mix. I was completely engrossed in my book, only vaguely aware of the stops and starts, the comings and goings of passengers. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the city, painting everything in that golden hour glow. It was actually peaceful. A nice change of pace from the usual chaos of my day. Then, the peace shattered. It started with a loud, sharp voice cutting through the murmur of the bus. Well, look what we have here. I didn't immediately register that it was directed at me. I assumed some teenagers up front were being rowdy, or maybe someone had dropped their phone. I kept reading, trying to ignore it. But the voice got louder, more pointed. You know, this used to be a decent bus route. Now look at it. I finally looked up, my internal Jack Ryan alert system pinging. Standing in the aisle, a few seats in front of me, was a woman who could comfortably be described as robust. Blonde hair pulled back in a tight, severe bun, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose even though the sun was already setting, and a facial expression that suggested she'd just bitten into a lemon. Standard issue Karen, basically, but with an extra side of venom. She was staring directly at me, a sneer twisting her lips. My instincts, honed by years of dealing with the worst of humanity, told me this was going to be trouble. Big trouble. I sighed internally. I was tired. I was hungry. And I really just wanted to finish my book. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't something I could ignore. I closed the book, marking my page, and looked at her squarely. Can I help you with something? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral and non-confrontational. That was a mistake. It was like I'd just thrown gasoline on a fire. Her eyes narrowed, and she puffed out her chest. You know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a respectable neighborhood. We don't need your kind around here, bringing down the property values and making decent people uncomfortable. I blinked. Okay, so we were going there. I'd dealt with racism before, of course. It comes with the territory of being a black man in America. But usually, it was more subtle, more insidious. This was blatant, aggressive, and surprisingly, public. I immediately assessed the situation. The bus driver was staring straight ahead, pretending not to hear anything. A few passengers were glancing nervously in our direction, but most were pointedly avoiding eye contact. No one was going to intervene. Ma'am, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and level, I'm just trying to get home. I haven't done anything to anyone. She scoffed. Oh, I'm sure. Just sitting there, looking menacing. You probably don't even live around here. Probably coming here to cause trouble. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I do live here, actually. And I assure you, I have no intention of causing any trouble. I just want to get to my stop. Liar, she shrieked, drawing more attention. I've lived here for 20 years. I know everyone who lives on this route, and I've never seen you before. You're obviously up to no good. At this point, a couple of younger guys in the back of the bus started snickering. I could feel my blood pressure rising. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was a professional, that I was better than this. Ma'am, I understand you're concerned, but you're mistaken. I live on Elm Street. Number 42. I even gave her my real address, confident that she was just blowing hot air. She just laughed, a shrill, unpleasant sound. See? He's admitting it. Elm Street. That's practically the other side of town. He doesn't belong here. Driver. I demand you kick him off the bus. He's making me feel unsafe. The driver, bless his heart, mumbled something about needing to stick to his route. He still didn't look at us. Coward. I couldn't say I blamed him, though. Confronting a Karen in full battle mode was a task I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Look, lady, I said, my patience finally starting to fray. I've had a long day. I don't have time for this. Just leave me alone. Leave you alone. I should call the police. You're probably a criminal. I bet you have drugs on you. Or a weapon. She was getting closer now, her face red and contorted with rage. I could smell the cheap perfume she was wearing, a cloying, overwhelming scent that made me want to gag. I knew this was escalating. I needed to shut this down, and fast. I could feel the eyes of the other passengers on me, some curious, some afraid, but all of them waiting to see what would happen next. I had a choice to make. I could try to reason with her, which was clearly a lost cause. I could ignore her and hope she eventually gave up. Or I could pull out my badge. My gut told me that arguing with her was pointless, and ignoring her would only embolden her. So, I decided to play my trump card. It wasn't ideal. I hated flashing my credentials like that. But desperate times called for desperate measures. With a sigh, I reached inside my jacket. The movement seemed to electrify her. Her eyes widened, and she took a step back. What are you doing? Are you going to pull a knife on me? I knew it. I knew you were dangerous. I ignored her theatrics and calmly pulled out my badge and ID holder. I flipped it open, making sure it was clearly visible. Federal Bureau of Investigation, I said, my voice now firm and authoritative. Agent Joshua Williams. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down and step away from me. The effect was instantaneous. The color drained from her face, and her jaw dropped. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. The snickering in the back of the bus stopped abruptly. Even the driver seemed to perk up, glancing in the rearview mirror with a newfound interest. FBI? She stammered, her voice barely a whisper. But. Yes, ma'am, I said, holding my badge up for emphasis. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. Please step away from me and return to your seat. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take further action. She stood there for a moment, frozen, her eyes darting back and forth between my badge and my face. Then, slowly, almost robotically, she turned around and shuffled back to her seat. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of disbelief and humiliation. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bus. The tension that had filled the air dissipated, replaced by an almost palpable sense of relief. I could feel the eyes of the other passengers on me again, but this time, it was with a mixture of awe and gratitude. I closed my badge holder and tucked it back inside my jacket. Thank you for your cooperation, I said, my voice still loud enough for her to hear. Then, I turned back to my book, trying to regain some semblance of composure. The rest of the ride was blessedly uneventful. Karen didn't say another word. She sat there, stiff and silent, avoiding my gaze. The other passengers returned to their phones and conversations, though I could still feel them discreetly glancing in my direction from time to time. As the bus approached my stop, I stood up and gathered my belongings. As I walked past Karen, I paused for a moment. "Have a good evening, ma'am," I said, my voice polite but firm. She didn't respond. She just kept staring straight ahead. I stepped off the bus and onto the sidewalk, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving me feeling drained and exhausted. I couldn't believe that had just happened. I, an FBI agent, had been racially harassed on a public bus. The irony was almost too much to bear. I started walking towards my house, my mind racing. What should I do? Should I report the incident? Would anyone even believe me? After all, it was just a verbal altercation. No one had been physically harmed. But then I thought about Karen's words, her hateful accusations, the fear in the eyes of the other passengers. I realized that I couldn't just let it go. If I didn't do something, she would just keep doing it. And next time, it might be someone who couldn't defend themselves. I made up my mind. I was going to report her. I walked into my house, threw my bag down, and immediately went to my laptop. I needed to document everything while it was still fresh in my mind. I typed out a detailed account of the incident, including Karen's description, the time and location of the bus route, and the names of any witnesses I could remember. Then, I debated my next move. Should I report it to the local police? Or should I go through internal channels at the FBI? I decided on the latter. It felt like the right thing to do, given the circumstances. I drafted a formal complaint to the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility, outlining everything that had happened and requesting an investigation into potential civil rights violations. I attached my detailed account of the incident and submitted the complaint online. The process was surprisingly straightforward, though it felt strangely impersonal. I was used to being on the other side of investigations, not the subject of one. The next few days were a blur. I tried to focus on my work, but it was hard to shake the feeling of being watched, of being judged. I knew my colleagues were aware of the complaint, even if they didn't say anything directly. There were knowing glances, hushed conversations, and an overall sense of awkwardness that I couldn't ignore. Then, one morning, I got a call from a senior special agent from the OPR. She introduced herself as Agent Davies and informed me that she was assigned to investigate my complaint. She was professional and courteous, but her tone was neutral, almost detached. She asked me to come in for an interview the following day. The interview was intense. Agent Davies grilled me for hours, going over every detail of the incident. She asked me about my motivations, my background, and my previous experiences with racism. She seemed particularly interested in my decision to reveal my FBI credentials. "Agent Williams," she said, her voice sharp and direct, "you understand that using your badge in that manner could be interpreted as an abuse of authority?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I was aware of that. But I felt it was necessary to de-escalate the situation and protect myself and the other passengers on the bus." "And you believed that was the only option available to you?" "At that moment, yes, ma'am. I felt that any other course of action would have been ineffective, or even dangerous." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "All right, Agent Williams. Thank you for your cooperation. We will be in touch." I left the interview feeling exhausted and uncertain. I had no idea what to expect. Would I be disciplined for my actions? Would Karen be held accountable for her racist behavior? Or would the whole thing just be swept under the rug? A week later, I got another call from Agent Davies. She asked me to come back to her office. This time, her demeanor was different. She seemed more relaxed, more human. "Agent Williams," she said, "we have completed our investigation into your complaint. We have determined that Karen, we learned her name, Stevens engaged in discriminatory behavior and violated your civil rights. We have also determined that your use of your FBI credentials was justified under the circumstances, given the potential threat to public safety. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. So, what happens now? Agent Davies leaned forward. Well, Ms. Stevens is facing several charges, including disorderly conduct, harassment, and a hate crime enhancement given the racial nature of her actions. The local authorities have issued a warrant for her arrest, and she will be taken into custody. We've already spoken with the bus driver and several passengers, and their accounts corroborated yours, thankfully. They were all pretty shaken up by what they witnessed. I felt a surge of relief. Justice was being served. That's good to hear. Furthermore, Agent Davies continued, we've been in contact with Ms. Stevens' employer. She worked as a paralegal at a local law firm. They were, shall we say, not thrilled to learn about her behavior. She has since been terminated from her position. My eyebrows shot up. That was unexpected, but definitely welcome news. Wow. That's pretty comprehensive. We take these matters very seriously, Agent Williams, Agent Davies said, her voice firm. We will not tolerate discrimination or hate speech, whether it's directed at our own agents or the public we serve. I appreciate that, ma'am. More than you know. There's one more thing, she added. The FBI legal counsel has authorized a payment to you to try and begin to make you whole. It is nowhere near what was said to you, but based on similar cases, the FBI approved an initial payment of $100,000 for emotional distress, pain, and suffering. It's not much, but it is a start to help you heal and move forward with your life. I was floored. I had never expected anything like that. I don't know what to say. Just know that we stand with you, Agent Williams. And we are committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. I left Agent Davies' office feeling a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. The whole ordeal had been incredibly stressful and humiliating, but knowing that Karen was being held accountable and that the FBI supported me made it all worthwhile. The next day, I saw a news report on the local TV station about Karen Stevens' arrest. They showed a picture of her, looking disheveled and defeated, being led away in handcuffs. The reporter mentioned the charges against her and the fact that she had been fired from her job. The comments section on the news website was a cesspool of outrage and support, but overall, the sentiment seemed to be in my favor. People were disgusted by Karen's behavior and applauded the FBI for taking action. I knew that the arrest and the media coverage wouldn't erase what had happened. The memory of Karen's hateful words would likely stay with me for a long time. But it did give me a sense of vindication, a feeling that justice had been served.